I often wonder if there's a limitation to what reloaders will do to get those groups just a little bit smaller. It's not uncommon when I hear discussions of sorting components for weight, volume, and length. We often use very accurate scales, comparators of different types, and various measuring and trimming tools, all to gain a small advantage in performance. When it comes to sorting projectiles, I've heard many things. Sorting projectiles by weight is pretty easy, but in my limited testing, I never really saw much of an effect on performance. At least, not that I could confidently measure. I've heard others about sorting by base to tip, but when using bowtail hollow point construction, it seems that there's just too much variance in the tips from projectile to projectile for this to be a meaningful sorting process. To summarize an interview with Brian Litz from 2015, when asked if he was going to sort any projectiles, what dimension would he sort it by, he talks about base to ogive. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and a tool that can be used to perform that test. Where there's certainly more options in this particular product is made by Sinclair or Brownells, depending on which website you go to. And what we're going to talk about today actually is 3 different pieces: the stand itself, the dial indicator, as well as the comparator body. The comparator bodies are available in different calibers: 22, 6mm, 6.5mm, 7mm, 30 caliber, and 338. They also advertise you can use it with their hex comparator, but I don't have one of those to demonstrate for today. You might have guessed already that I'm going to be doing some upcoming testing on the channel. My biggest goal when it comes to doing testing on this channel is to figure out what actually matters. When it comes to reloading, there's so many things that people do. Actually putting numbers behind what's worth doing and what isn't is very difficult to ascertain, especially for new guys. So if you sort projectiles, I'd love to know in the comment section below the way you sort them, but we're going to talk about this tool today. But in the future, I'm going to come out with a video that talks about sorting in different ways and seeing if that actually has an effect on the performance that we can measure. Or at least I'm going to do my best. But in today's video, we're going to primarily focus on the Sinclair comparator and give you a little bit of an idea the differences you can see in lots of projectiles. Now for our demonstration for today's video, we're going to be looking at 2 different lots of projectiles from 2 different manufacturers, just to give you an idea. If you ask me, sorting projectiles is about exciting as watching paint dry. So we're not going to do much of that. But for both lots we're going to talk about today, we've sorted 40 samples out of the Barnes match burners, as well as 40 samples out of the Berger long range target. And I'm going to show you the extremes that we found. Now, one of the reasons why I got this kit was simply because of the lever. It's very easy just to use the lever, insert your projectile, and then take your measurement. Initially what I did was take a random projectile, zero my indicator, which is one of the biggest reasons why I picked the digital version of this. There's also an analog dial indicator. Being able to zero my digital indicator was something I was interested in. Of note, I also changed the tip on the dial indicator with the other option that comes in the kit. You can see we zeroed on a reference projectile, and then we're going to go to an extreme on the other end. You can see at the other end of the spectrum for these 40 samples that it was shorter by 6.5 thousandths, which is a pretty big jump, especially if you've seen my cartridge overall length and how it affects accuracy video. This might become a flyer, but until we do the testing, we really don't know. These are the Barnes match burners, and so since they're on the cheaper end, it doesn't really surprise me. Not that cost always equals performance. On the other end of the spectrum, let's look at some Berger 144s. We'll zero out on one of our reference units, and we can see most of the lot is actually within 1,000th of cartridge base to ogive difference. For these Berger 144s, even though in my initial testing they haven't been super accurate, the base to ogive measurement on these is very, very consistent. I actually tested the remaining 50 that I had in this projectile, and all of them seem to be within 1,000th. So maybe in this case, do you get what you pay for? I really don't know. But pretty easily to understand, and relatively quickly, we're able to sort through the projectiles and detect any variances. But let's talk about cost for a second, because value is important. First, the base itself without the dial indicator is around $60. Again, this is the price they are today with no coupon codes attached. If you want the base with a standard dial indicator, that retails for around $80. The way you see it decked out here is $119, again, before any coupon codes that you might find. Of all the comparator bodies, they seem to be either $10 or $11. And at least the time of recording this video, most all of them are in stock, though for the past few months, that has not been the case. I'm not sure there's anything particularly special about these comparators. In fact, I've played around a little bit with my Short Action Customs comparator set, taken one off and replaced it with it. We've zeroed it out, and we can get fairly consistent results. So if you have a comparator set that you prefer, you might be able to get away with it. Again, kind of your choice. I personally like the Short Action Customs comparators because they mimic the point on the ogive of the projectile where it would go into your rifling. For the comparators offered by Sinclair, that's not the case. I took my pin gauges and did some measurements. It's very easy to start a .264 pin gauge in the hole, and even though this is milled all the way through, my smallest pin gauge, which is .251 inches, would start just the same, but wouldn't go all the way through. The exact dimension of where the ogive projectile is being compared against, I really don't know. There seems to be a much larger bearing surface in comparison to using something like the Short Action Customs, so draw your own conclusions. Again, they're not extremely expensive, $10 or $11, but if you already got something you trust, you might want to think about it. Which, if you can use the Short Action Customs comparator, you might think, well, why don't you just use your calipers? Which is a very good question. And you may certainly be able to, but the one thing that concerns me is being able to control exactly how much force you're putting on that comparator. With the Sinclair setup, you're only going to have the spring action of the dial indicator, so that should be consistent from measurement to measurement. Whereas if you're measuring with calipers, even if you zero it out, you might put additional force on it, which can adjust your measurement from one side to the other. Not really ideal. However, if you're comfortable doing it this way, I certainly don't blame you. But that is certainly one of the reasons why you might want to think about a setup like this rather than using your calipers. So if you guys have any tips or tricks on how to sort projectiles, I'd love to hear your tips in the comments section below. If you'd like to learn more about how cartridge overall length affects the velocity, check out this playlist here, and you can see how important this measurement might be to the accuracy of your reloads. If you're interested to see how this testing works out, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you come back next week. And until then, stay safe in small groups.